Thank you very much for having me here. I'm really excited to talk to you all. Um, I'm going to start by talking about sort of my philosophy and the way that I think about this because I am not an expert. It was nice to hear Laura talk about the garden buddies that you don't have to be an expert. I don't have an educational background in um, the work of restoration. I actually struggle with ecological restoration because of a lot of people define it as bringing something back to like pre-colonization or something like that. And not only do I think that that's not possible, but it also doesn't really reflect kind of my philosophy and my passion. So I've started saying that I practice ecological restorative action. And there's a definition that's on Lifestyle Sustainability Directory that reads restorative action in the context of sustainability, refers to intentional measures taken to repair damage to ecosystems, communities, or resources, aiming to return them to a healthier, more functional state. And I feel like that's what I do, and you'll hear some about that in the rest of my talk. I'm also really inspired by the younger people. So I have a quote on here by Shia Bastida. She is a 23-year-old Mexican climate justice activist. And I really like the way she thinks about her work. I think it reflects kind of my idea of work, probably many of yours. So I put this quote on here. We are on earth to take care of life. We are on earth to take care of each other. And I really think that that's very important to think about. And one of the things I really like about Shie's work is that she's, along with her climate activism, focused on changing harmful policies that are already in place in order to avoid the burnout that comes with some of that type of work. She is also focusing with her friends and allies to create visions about what our future can look like and how we can move forward to start making that happen like right now. So um, I realize that the work that I do on our land and with Grow Wild does that for me too. It brings me hope and keeps me mentally and physically healthy. And when I meet and work with others with the same land philosophy, it helps to build community and hope for all of us. Much of like what you're talking about doing, um, like buddying up with people and sharing the knowledge that you have. So today I'm going to tell you the story of my journey to and experience with the ongoing work of Meadow property. And I'm hoping it will motivate and inspire you to try something like this on your own space. So I started my first sort of restorative work on a small plot of land in St. Louis, Missouri. I lived in this house that you see in this picture for 33 years, and I raised my kids there. In the last about 15 years of my time in this property, I was working to convert my yard to a yard without any grass. And at the time, I was very interested in permaculture, so I used a lot of their philosophies. And I used to say to people that everything in my yard is native or edible, or preferably both. So I was like working both with native plants and with edible perennial plants mostly. So I during this period of time, I started working for the Missouri Botanical Garden as an environmental educator, and that's my background is more in education. Um, but I ended up at an ecology center that the garden manages, where I worked closely with the education and with the restoration ecologists that work there, and I absolutely fell in love with that type of work. And that's just really where I began to realize that that's really with my education, but it's really where I needed to spend my time. So I started working towards placing some of that into my property here. This is about a 2/10 of an acre property with a house plopped right in the middle of it. So the front yard and backyard are about the same. They're tiny, and the what I saw happen by doing this was way beyond what I would have ever expected. Um, So I wanted to start out to tell you a little bit about where I came from, but also to show that you can do this kind of work in smaller pieces of property. So in 2018, my husband and I moved to the area, Ithaca area. It took us about 5 years to decide where to move, and it seemed like a good fit for us. We had different things that we wanted to gain from this move. One of it was to go to a cooler climate, which we're proving to have moved to a much cooler climate today. um, we were tired of the hot and humid um, humidity that comes with living in the St. Louis area, and we both love outdoor activities, and that was difficult for us. And we wanted to own some land as part of our life experience. So we landed here in February of 2018, and um, by July, we had found this piece of property. This is part of it that you're looking at here. And we closed on the property. The property is 65 acres, and approximately 20 of it is the field that you're looking at. And you can see in the upper right-hand corner the earliest image that we could find was in the 1930s. So we're assuming that this property has been used as agricultural land for probably 100 years or more. The bottom picture is taken in August of 2025. You can see that we're making some changes on the land, not only with meadow work, but you can't really tell where all the trees are, but you can see that there's some large vernal pools that are kind of right above and to the west of that building, which is the barn that I'm in now. And then the nursery is behind there. And there's a lot of stuff going on in this little field. So while I don't practice a lot of permaculture, one of the principles that I really anymore, I used to do it a lot, but one of the principles that I really have hung on to is the observe and interact, where they suggest that you spend a year with a piece of property to kind of observe like how the water runs across it, the wind, what's already growing there, where how the light moves, trying to just identify what it's like before jumping in and doing something. And I love that principle. It's really hard to follow because when you have a piece of property and you get excited, you just don't want to wait a year. But fortunately, part of this was wooded, and most of the land is wooded, and there's a lot of invasive species. And I knew no matter how long I waited, they were coming out. So I put my energy into removing invasive species in the woods while also thinking about how I wanted a meadow, because I fell in love with prairies when I was living in the St. Louis area, and I helped to manage a small prairie there, and I just fell in love with them. So I knew that I wanted to preserve part of this field as a meadow. And so, let's see. So I started thinking about choices of how I wanted to approach putting a meadow in. And a little bit less, probably 9 months later, I didn't quite wait for a year. I had made my choice and I started the process of starting a meadow. Um, there were ways that I had learned by working the Missouri Botanical Garden, ways that you could create and manage prairies. And so I had some background in that, and I had some mentors there that I could talk to. So I kind of thought about them and wrote a pros and cons list, and thinking about my own specific place here and how I wanted to approach it. So herbicide is one thing that you can do to prepare a space for a meadow. A lot of people don't like the idea of herbicide. I don't particularly like the idea of spraying herbicide. I do use it to paint stumps on woody stuff. But when I thought about the pros, it's a quick site prep. You can spray an area and you can kill the vegetation, and you can it doesn't require heavy equipment. We don't own like a tractor, and we aren't intending to own a tractor or anything like that. So you could just walk and do this with a sprayer. And you can cover a large area in one season. But the cons, kind of took this off the table pretty quickly. And that is, while I have worked with herbicide. I don't really want to expose myself or the other living beings around to herbicide, spraying herbicide. Um, One of my biggest concerns was that of the drift. We live on a hilltop and there's a lot of wind. Herbicide can drift into it and kill things that are unintended. We also have a farmer next door to us that, as far as I know, doesn't use any herbicide on their land, and I just didn't want to bring herbicide into the neighborhood. It just didn't. It's not something I wanted to do. You're also left with dead plant material when you spray it, and like if you were in prairie country, they would burn that, or it's they have a real burn culture there, but here not so much. So I would be having to deal with that. So that was kind of off the table pretty much right away for me. And then tilling is another thing. This is what was done to create a small prairie at the ecology center where I worked. It was done before I started working there, but I learned a lot about how to do it this way, just from the information that was there and the people that worked there. So the pros are you can cover a large area. It's quickish site prep. I say quickish because when you're tilling an area, you need to put in a cover crop to help suppress the weeds, and then you turn it over. At least this is how it was done there. And then you plant another cover crop, and then again they would burn it there. And so it's just like taking time to prepare the soil, or prepare the site. The cons to me was damage to the soil ecosystem. Now, this field probably doesn't have a very healthy ecosystem because it's been agriculture or hay fields or whatever for a long time. The weed seed bank germination, which no matter how much you prep, is gonna be there, and you do need heavy equipment unless you're doing a small area. And again, we don't have the heavy equipment, so that was an option. But I ended up choosing, for our particular project, suppression and or solarization. Um, the pros that I liked was there was no need for heavy equipment again. You can prepare a relatively large but manageable area. And this was important for me personally because I tend to get really big ideas and then it gets a little bit more than I can manage. And so this kind of brought the idea into something that would be more manageable for me. There's no or little soil disturbance. The only con when I was thinking about this that I could think of was the waste. You are using tarps that eventually are going to break down and have to be disposed of in a landfill. I did not like that idea, but it ended up being the best fit for me, this particular approach. Now, there are other approaches. These were the three that I had some experience in, so that's what I looked at. There are a couple of other things under cons that are in italics. These are things I did not think about at the time, but I have learned. If you are using large tarps, like what you see in that picture that we are using, they're a challenge moving them. We're going to talk about that more in a few minutes, but they're big and they're heavy, and if it's windy, you can either get really upset or you can really find it funny. But nonetheless, it's a challenge. And the tarps can and will move if not weighted correctly. This is probably was my biggest challenge, which I'll also talk in more detail about. But once you kind of get the system down, it works out okay. But things to think about, especially if you live in sort of a more windy, open area and you decide to do something like this. So this is kind of my recipe of what we do now to give you an overview. What you're seeing in the pictures is I've zoomed in to the places where we put the meadow. You can see that the driveway coming in from the road is on the right as you enter. There's like a diagonal sort of line across that. That's a path that I've put in. That's established. We're going to put in another one soon, and sort of this mowed area around it. So that is the whole area that's been done now. Even from this view, or maybe because of this view, you can see the strips still from the first. This is this was the seventh strip. Like we moved the tarp for the seventh time this year. So you can kind of even see it. One, two, three. Yeah, you can count like six. The tarp had not been moved at this point. We moved it in September. This picture is from August. Um, so it's a nice, it's unintentionally has turned into a nice demonstration area for people to come out and kind of see the trajectory. You can kind of just walk right along it, first year, second year, third year, and see the difference. So back to my recipe. One of the things that became very clear was really important for in my situation is I need to mow our area and keep it mowed until I'm ready to tarp. And that means that for the year before we move that tarp, I mow that section occasionally. I'll let it grow up to like 6 or 7 inches, whatever my little mower will handle, and mow it down. And this is because this old field has a lot of Canada goldenrod in it. So if you're familiar with looking at old fields in the fall, you'll see that they're covered with goldenrod, and that's likely either tall or Canada goldenrod. And if I don't mow it regularly, or I mow it right before, they produce sort of a woody stalk. They're not woodies, but it's a very woody stalk. And when you mow them down and then you put a tarp on it, they can and do puncture a tarp. The same would be true if you have woody things. If you have trees or shrubs that are trying to encroach on your field, like they will, you need to keep that mowed down, or else you're going to have a lot of work to prepare. So I just mow that the year. When I'm mowing, I just run through there every once in a while when it looks like it's getting high, and that makes a big difference. And then I mow it close before we move the tarp. So when you're ready to tarp, you should use high quality tarps to cover the area. The other thing that I learned was that you really need to invest in some good quality tarps. The first year I did it, I used whatever I could find. I used some. We have a place near here that rents like tractors and whatever equipment, and they have what they call a driveway tarp kit, and it's about 12 foot wide and about 80 feet long, and I guess that pretty much covers the lengths of driveways. So I got a couple of those and put them in, but mostly I was just looking for old tarps we had or whatever we had and weighing them down with whatever I could find, which was anything from like leftover building lumber to cord wood to bricks, whatever I could find. That's a big mistake. And that's because first of all, a lot of the old tarps that you're putting down are degrading already, and they just become a mess. Probably the biggest problem for me was again the wind, and if you don't have them weighed properly, they will come loose. And the more you try and put them back to the right place, the more you're likely to leave openings and cracks in it, and then you have vegetation growing up through it, which you don't want. So you can find this geotextile at like Lowe's and places like that. They're permeable, which is nice. The other thing is if you use regular tarps, you have water sitting on it and mosquitoes. It's just it's a mess. And they last at least 3 years. If you take care of them and are careful with them, they'll last longer, which is really nice. It's not fun to have to throw them into the landfill, but at least if you can get many years out of them, that's good. So we also secure the tarps now with almost all cinder blocks, something that's weighted. And if you check like Marketplace or some of those places online, you often can find people that just want you to come get this stuff for free, and get it away. We've done some of that, but really cinder blocks aren't all that expensive. And worth the investment. And spacing them is really important. We space the ones around the edges 2 or 3 feet apart, like close. So we've got a lot of them. And then don't forget to weigh down the middle. When wind goes across these tarps, it'll lift from the middle and pull out from the sides. One of the hardest things for me to do is overlapping the tarps at least 12 inches, because you always feel like you're losing some of the space you could seed But that's really helpful to do that, to overlap it that far so that the seed bank underneath it, if they start, if and when they start um, germinating, if they can find that light, they'll come out there. Um, and it's really to your advantage to make sure that you don't have plants growing out from those seams and overlaps in there. Um, one of the We have weeds that grow up out from under the cinder blocks. They don't grow through the tarp, or their roots don't go through the tarp, but there's enough moisture and maybe enough soil that you get a lot of weeds that want to grow out from underneath your weights. That's the problem. They come up really easily, but the problem is, and my problem, because I seed in the fall, is by the time I get ready to seed, they are already seeding. And so they're dropping all that seed on your tarp, and you don't want that in your now nice bare soil. So you have to move those tarps out in a way and dump them somewhere. We do it in the driveway. Um, and they're big tarps to begin with, and that's extra effort. I They always look like I don't have time to do it, because mostly because I'm of the nursery and it's just like one more thing and I don't do it. This year, my help and I were determined and we did it, and it made all the difference. So I hope that I never let them grow like that again, because that's a big problem. And then leave it for a year. A lot of people say, well, I'm just going to put it in the spring and then seed it in the fall, or I'm going to do it over winter and spring and seed in the spring. And you can do that, but I think you're going to be much um, you, it's going to be much more successful if you can have the patience to leave it for a year. And if you're doing multiple years, it's easier to do that. The first year's hard, but then you just have, your routine. I move it every fall, or I move it every spring, whichever way you choose. So moving the tarp, um, we always have to have. We like to have like 6 people help us because they're really long tarps. We now are down to having single tarps. Before we were piecing some together. Now it's just long rolls of tarps. If you do something like this, you might want to do um, like the move, seed, and feed, which is what I like to do. It's most fun to like seed, but of course you can't seed till you move it. So if we're lucky, we can get people started early enough in the morning where and if I'm prepared, if I've got like the cinder blocks, all most of them off, and there's no weeds in it, I'll like move the tarp and then put the seed out, which is the most fun, and then I feed them. We always have a chili meal. So if you're going to need help, you might think of like some community thing like that. You don't have to seed it that same day. And often we just can't because of the weather. We can't start at the time because people that are helping us can't stay or whatever. But it's nice to get it all done that day. You can see our friend Jess up in the corner. It's hard to tell, but what she's carrying is a piece of lumber that we had down to weigh with smartweed, Polygonum pennsylvanicum, that had grown up underneath it, wrapped all around that wood that you yanked up easily, but it looks like she's carrying a shrub. There's just they get so big and so like, happy there. So try and avoid that if you can. And the people folding the tarp, we're folding the tarp there because there's seeds in it from them falling out. Whereas this year we were able to move it. You still have to move it carefully. There's still things on it you don't want, but we were able to move it a lot easier. And then the seeding's really fun, I think. So to prepare for your seeding, you want to remove any of the vegetation that was growing up between the seams. If I should have pointed that out before, we can look back. This is a really good year on this one. You aren't seeing anything growing up because we really learned a lot. We're overlapping it correctly. You can see how close the weights are. We're weighing it down correctly. We're kind of got it going now, finally. So if you do have vegetation growing up, you should try and get it out, because it's probably something that's very persistent and something you may not want. It could be something you want, and if you can identify that, then of course leave it. Um, we rake with just your garden rakes. Just we don't try really hard to break the soil much, but just to put some kind of grooves in there so that the seed can kind of it can kind of hold the seed, because it's pretty smooth surface when we remove these tarps. And I don't worry about it too much, but it does kind of it helps. It also helps us rake out some of the dead vegetation that's still persisting under there that won't allow the seed to like touch the soil. Um, then you need to find a source, a seed source that works for you. There's a lot of are starting to put together seed mixes in our area, native seed mixes. We use Ernst, which is probably one of the best known. They're out of Pennsylvania, if you're not familiar. They have a lot of lovely seed mixes available. This They do not have a seed mix that has everything that is native to New York State. They will do custom mixes. I've never done that. I'm okay with having a, a species or some species in there that are just like outside of our boundary. That's all right for me personally, but it may not be for you, and they will work with you, and other people will work for, with you, I'm sure. Um, you're going to learn a lot about your land and as you start doing this, and if you're going to do it over multiple years like me, you might want to decide to adjust your seed mix as you learn that you're buying seed that's never coming up. It just can't compete with whatever your conditions are. Sometimes you can try other things, and I've done that a couple of times. Sometimes I've gone back, and sometimes I've kept something. But you'll need an annual cover crop, and this is to help suppress some of those weeds that want to come up right away. If you're seeding in the fall, it would be a rye. If you're seeding in the spring, it would be oats. Um, and you're going to need some kind of material to help you more evenly spread your seed. So sawdust or sand, both of them or either of them would need to be damp, because you want it to hold your seed. So when you order your seed, you'll be surprised at how small the bag is for the area that you're going to be seeding. So you need something like this to help you be able to spread it more evenly. We spread it by hand. And what I use are bedding pellets that you can get at Tractor Supply. They for like horse bedding. I'm sure used for all kinds of animal beddings, but they're advertise them as for horses, and they're little pellets of compressed sawdust. And so when the animal urinates on it, they kind of break down into something that looks like, well, what looks like in what I do is I will dump some in this little wagon that we have that our riding mower can pull. And I just have my hose there, and I just spray a little bit of moisture in there and stir it with a stick, and until it breaks down into the amount that I want. The rule of thumb is a ratio of 5 to 1, 5 being your sawdust or sand to 1 part seed. I don't worry about that anymore. I'm sure mine is more than 5 to 1. I'm sure, because if I have people helping me, I want lots, and people are learning. They're going to dump more in some places, and it's not going to be even mix. I don't worry about that. I'd rather people have the experience and have the help than get it exactly right. And also, ideally, you would want to go one way all the way across, and then turn and go the other, so you have like this crisscross of spreading. That doesn't happen very often. We usually don't have enough when we get done going the first time to make it all the way back. So then what we do is we just go and we find places where there's not sawdust. The nice thing about having sawdust is that you can see where you put down seed, and we just go around and find areas and fill in like holes, I guess. While we use it, you can see these white buckets in there. They're like painter buckets or something like that to scoop out of the trailer. And then I usually have some of the quart yogurt containers, something like that you can scoop in there, and it makes it a little easy to kind of shake it gently out on the ground. Um, so you're just going to try and cover the area as evenly as possible. You can get these rollers that you can pull behind tractors that you can go over to compress the seed because you want to try as best you can to have seed to soil contact. Um, we just walk on it. So I encourage people to walk all over it. Don't worry about it. In fact, if you seed in front of you and you can walk right on it and seed some more, that's good. That's how we do it. It's fine. When I worked at the ecology center, we would seed with kids and we would have a rate or some music and we would all have a dance party on it. So it's just like you just want to try and get that seed, touching the ground as best you can. And then I cover it very loosely with straw. You can see in that picture, I want to be able to see the soil. Um, it I hope that the straw does help a little bit to keep some of the seed from blowing away until we get some rain, maybe hide it a little bit from the birds and rodents. They're going to want to eat some of it. I don't really know how effective it is, but everybody I know who does this covers it with a light coating of straw. So that's what I do. Um, okay, now we wait. So I seed in the fall. Um, some folks seed in the spring. Professional people, some of them seed in the spring. To me, it doesn't make sense to me because we our seeds, most of the native seeds need a winter stratification. So it makes sense to me to put them on the ground in the fall. So that's what I do. But I know there's been success doing it the other way. So do, what makes most sense to you. Okay. So your first year growth, I call that the terrifying year. I don't, it doesn't matter how many times I do it, I fuss and worry about the first year. It always looks terrible. There's not been one time when it didn't. And people talk to me about it. Oh, our meadow failed. We sowed last year and it's just a bunch of weeds. I'm like, give it time. Um, the first year is when you're going to learn a whole lot about your space. You're going to learn what's in your soil, in your seed bank that's in your soil. Mine is white clover. And it is, you can see in that picture, this is one of the worst places where it is. It is so dense there that any of my native seed will have a hard time coming up through that. It's just something I'm having to deal with, and I'm dealing with it in different ways. Some years there's a lot of clover, and other years there's not. Um, so it's not going to be very attractive. And okay, I'm going to say a little bit about the seed mixes, the wildflower seed mixes that you can buy at, I don't know, Lowe's or online. It's a beautiful meadow mix. And here's what I found that happens with this is your first year won't look like what we're seeing here. The first year, because they often will load it up with your annual like cosmos and um, zinnias and short-lived perennials like black-eyed Susans and brown-eyed Susans. So you get this glorious field of flowers. But what happens with most of these mixes is that after a few years, they start to go away and other things start to come in because they often won't include or not enough some of the long living perennials that take a couple of years to get established. So this is what's happening here on that first year is because what you're going to get is a better seed mix. It's not going to be full of, beautiful flowers that first year. They're going to all be down below, like starting their growth. So what you need to do is keep the vegetation cut to around 8 inches tall because you're going to probably get a lot of annual fleabane or other annual weed seeds that you've got in the soil. They're going to come right up and they're going to shade out your littles that are trying to come through. This is not it helps me none with my clover problem. But this is what you should do, and this is what I do, because the clover loves the sun. So it just gives them, you can tell that I don't like clover, at least in this case. So the other thing you can do is just go through there and remove undesirable plants or their seed heads. If they're, and especially on their edges, if they're trying to creep in or grow up, if you maybe didn't get them all out and you had like a crack in your tarp overlap or something, you can just do that. Most of the time with those, I will just carry pruners with me and just cut them off near the ground or even cut off the seed heads. Just try and manage it like that. But the most important thing is don't despair. Um, the second year things start to happen, um, there you'll likely start seeing short-lived perennials in there, like your brown-eyed Susans, your black-eyed Susans, native rye, or, other cool season grasses that might be included in your mix. I usually see Pisma digitalis, the foxglove beard tongue, sundrops, a variety of asters, Monarda, but some of, I won't see some of the other ones, but you start to like get excited. For me, these things growing up will start to suppress the clover because they do not like this, the shade. And you'll start to see something that's happening. I would suggest cutting your paths. And I would suggest that you do cut a path. You need to get in there. Like looking at a meadow from the edge is beautiful, but it's nothing like surrounding yourself with it. I would cut it early. Um, it's very difficult for me to cut it because I don't want to cut over any of my of my plants that are in the seed mix. You could actually plant it with a path and just seed outside the path area, I suppose. But get in there and cut your path. I would suggest doing it earlier. And look for the troublemakers, the things that you want to like keep an eye out for, to cut seed heads off, to cut it down lower. If I have, and I usually do, have some of the Canada goldenrod coming in, and I'll just try and cut it down low or cut the seed heads off it, just so that other things can compete. You'll start to lose at least the domination of like your Canada goldenrod if you keep it cut down low enough that sunlight's getting to other things. And then definitely look for the good stuff. Start enjoying what you're seeing in there. You may not be able. Oh, the other thing is you may not be able to cut off or cut down every single one of the species if you have a larger area, but just like what I do, this is down by the end of the driveway. I walk down there every day to put my sign up, open sign up for Grow Wild. I walk back and put the closed sign up. And one of those ways I always go in the meadow. It's right there calling to me. And I remember my pruners and I'll go in and I'll cut a few things. And if there's some area that's really a problem, like just too much of something, I might focus on that each day until I get it where I feel more comfortable with it. But just spending time in it, engaging in it, you can manage it pretty easily, I think. Speaking of management, so over the long term, so what to do about the things you don't want? I think it depends on your tolerance level of the non-natives. It's usually for me, as long as they're not taking over an area, I usually don't worry about them a whole lot. Queen Anne's lace is a really good example of this. I just don't worry about Queen Anne's lace. It gets outcompeted over time. So I don't, you're worried about who not. Timothy, Timothy is always in there. The reason why you can pull up Timothy by hand, the reason why I take it out all is because it's annoying. I'll look out there and I'll see all my native stuff and then I see Timothy. I don't want to see Timothy. So I'll pull it out. That's just for my own pleasure. It probably will get outcompeted after a while. Overly aggressive natives, with this, I'm talking really about the Canada goldenrod. I don't feel like I have any other over aggressive natives myself in there. I think that everybody's kind of living pretty happily together as far as the natives go. When to mow, that's been really hard for me because I add a strip every year. The meadow's not the same age, so I worry about when to mow. I think what we've fallen on, what we've decided kind of for our management strategy for our meadow is to just enter it into our um, mowing cycle that we've already established. So we have the area of this field um, broken up into three sections of areas where we're promoting or trying to manage it as meadow. We have a wetland area and we have a place where we're planting trees. We don't mow that. And so everything gets mowed in a 3-year rotation. And most of this that we're mowing has not been managed like this. It has not, we haven't planted anything in it basically. It's just the goldenrod field and we mow it. It gets every 3 years. And this is mostly started out, it's still changing. Our philosophy is kind of changing, but it started out as the way to control the woodies because natural succession, you're going to get shrubs and trees growing in, and we want to preserve a large part of this meadow as open. So at this point, we're going to include, which would be this year actually, mowing the meadow project on the 3rd year, even though part of it will be mowed in its 2nd year, even its 1st year. And then the next time around, it'll be closer to 3rd year. I just think it's going to be easiest for us to do it that way. Is just included in the regular maintenance of the field. We'll see how that goes. This is all about just kind of figuring it out as you go. Um, and then should we burn? I helped manage and run burns. And when I worked in St. Louis, I would go out to larger burns and help them out there. So I know something about burns. They are, they're they're burns. They're working with fire, and there's a lot that goes into preparing for it. And it's something that you can't say, I'm going to do this the 2nd week of September every year, because a lot depends on the moisture and the wind and the temperature, and all those have to be taken into consideration to have a safe burn. And so at this point, I'm not planning on burning because mostly because of the nursery, honestly. It's just too hard to plan something around that when the nursery is happening, and it's a lot of work, and I'm honestly a little nervous about it. So all those pieces. Right now, we're just going to go with mowing. The difference is going to be that we will not be able to have some species grow in the meadow because some plant species need bare soil in order to spread, in order to move their seeds. So the meadow, if we choose not to ever burn, will have lower diversity than if we had managed it with burn. And that might change over time. But for now, I think we aren't planning on doing that. So I think a lot of our restoration or restorative work, we treat it like kind of the way we have managed the land and farmland and stuff, in that we are in control and we know how to handle it, and that's a hard thing to let go of. It's like, it's my meadow and I'm going to do it. But I'm learning that if we engage with our space, that we're going to discover that we have allies. And I'm going to talk about this particular ally. This is the goldenrod leaf beetle that I began noticing on a section of our land that we are just managing by mowing. There's been no seed planted in there. And I started noticing the little larvae on those little black things in the early part of the season when I would mow paths, because I mow paths through there, and I would see them. I was like, oh, they're eating the goldenrod. That's interesting. And then I would see these beetles. I didn't make the connection between the two of them until this last year when I was mowing. And there were so many of those little beetles that they would just, if I would brush up against the goldenrod, they would just shower on me. And I'd have to stop every once in a while and shake out my pants. They'd be crawling on my pants. And luckily, we live in a place where no one can see me, so I could shake out my pants and then go on my way. And so I did some research, and the Friends of the Mississippi River, I found that they had something like this happen in a meadow project they had seeded that was then taken over by the Canada goldenrod. And they were managing it by mowing, which I had planned to do actually in this section. If you mow in July, the birds that would normally be nesting in your field or meadow have finished, and there's still time for growth. So you can mow it, and it'll allow other species in there to have time to grow up and get ahead of the goldenrod a little bit, so it can start building. So they were planning on doing that in their field, and they noticed the goldenrod leaf beetle there. And so I said, well, let's just see what happens. And they waited. And like about the third year, which kind of makes sense for me here, um, the population exploded, and the beetles, sometimes they actually killed the goldenrod, and they definitely suppressed it. Same thing happened here. So I don't know about killing it. I wasn't researching that much, but that the goldenrod, the Canada goldenrod, only reached about half this height that it normally would have. And lo and behold, up came asters and sedges, and we have some experimental plots where we have planted natives, suppressed and then planted natives for hoping that they will seed out into these areas. And I found bee balm, which it's not native to Tompkins County, so I know it came from one of these plots, all coming up. And so I was just delighted. So now I'm like looking for them everywhere. So it just reminded me that we don't know everything, and we need to pay attention to who's out there trying to help us. Because if I had mowed, I would have destroyed a lot of, of the beetles, because I was getting ready to mow that larger area. So surprises, these are some of what I have. These are pictures of other beings that I've found in my project, the Meadow project that we're talking about. I want to talk specifically about the two plants in the middle. So the swamp lousewort, Pedicularis lanceolata, is a hemiparasitic plant that likes wet prairies and meadows. And we have wet land here, wet meadow, and where I came from had a wet prairie. So I was familiar with this particular plant. And when the very first tarped area in the spring, these guys immediately showed up before like anything else had germinated in the seed mix. And I'm like, this is so weird, because no one would put this in a seed mix. It's not on my seed mix list. It could have accidentally gotten in my seed mix, but you know, um, I watched it, and I thought I looked all around and all the grass all around it where it hadn't been suppressed, couldn't find any indication of it. Areas where, it was just growing up, where we treated we planted the trees. They're right there. Couldn't find any of it. Someone from Cornell come out, and he said, because I'm like, could it have been in the seed mix? Could it, like, what? And he's like, I think you got it. It just was somewhere in the seed bank waiting for a chance. And it is, and so I forgot to say this. I also looked it up because I want to know where it was normally found, because I was trying to figure out if it had come in the seed mix. And so I went on the New York Flora Atlas, and they show you if it's found in certain counties. It was found in our county, and not only that, but this plant is threatened in New York. So here I've got this plant that just came up because of the nurturing, and now it's super fun because I can see where they are before I even get to them, because the vegetation is suppressed around it. And it's really kind of fun to see how it's like altering this area. I've also found it at the third year section. I also found another one there, so it's coming up. And then the purple stemmed angelica, last year in the second section that I had seeded. And it is native to our county. I've not found anywhere else on our property. Somehow it has come in. So as the meadow matures, it's like taking on a life of its own and changing. And it's also inviting all these other non-human people in. But actually the thing that most delights me is when there are people in our meadow. I love it when there are people that come over and they take the tours, or they just come over to photograph or be in it. And I just think it's just when you can share your place and and what you're doing is contagious, and people will go out and do it themselves. So people always wonder about scaling. This is back to the St. Louis house. This is our backyard. This was after many years of just having gardens around that patio you see. And finally decided I wanted to finish it. There was some on the edges that there were there were gardens around. And what I did for this particular decision for pass is I didn't mow, and then I watched how my family moved across the landscape. And where we walked, there's you can see a water feature, and we would go over there. And where we walked is where I put down cardboard and put in pass. So that's how I made the decision. In the other two pictures, you can see that I outlined it with whatever I could find there. There's cinder blocks, but I replaced it with like cobblestones and stuff. So I think just you can you can start however you want to with small, but if you decide to like do it all, there's you can. And then the front yard, how about the neighbors? People ask me about this all the time. So my approach to the front yard was to make it look a little bit more manicured. It does not look in this picture. If you're on the sidewalk, it would look more like that. But why I took this from the street and why I wanted to see it from here is that the curb is all for the neighbors. It says neighbor's garden, that white sign. I put some soil in there in that little fenced area and put in like herbs and had scissors there where they could cut the kind of gone crazy zinnias and cosmos, and invited people in. I also got a sign to put in the yard so that it knows there's intention, and that was from the Audubon Society. They have a really nice program there where you can get signs from them and put in your yard. So those kind of things really help to make it possible to garden. Oh, the free plants. Also in the front, I wanted it to look more manicured, and instead of letting, and our natives will spread. So in the spring, I would kind of dig up some of those babies and I would put them down on the street in little pots with a little strip of paper that said who they were and where they'd like to be planted. And I would just let people, every year they took all of them. People would just come by and take them. And then I would see my plants growing around the neighborhood, which was really nice. So I think engaging people in your space is helpful for all kinds of reasons. I also was part of a tour. I had a person who became a friend who started the Sustainable Backyard Tour in St. Louis, and she asked me if I would be on her first tour. It ended up I was on a number of tours and helped her. But just having people like come through and talk to you about what's going on can help to spread the word. So, closing. I really want people to think about this work as a loving work, a nurturing work, a way for you to connect or reconnect to the natural world. I think nurturing and caring for all life on Earth is nurturing for ourselves as well. And I think I know we're a species that are born for this. I mean, we have we're part of nature, and I think part of what we are here to do. So I hope all of you are working towards a better world for the future of our children and grandchildren. But we can all become burnt out by always fighting against things that are wrong. So we also need to fight towards a better story, our collective vision of the beautiful world we want to see in the future. And we can start that in our own space, whatever size. Put down roots and model what it's like to nurture the earth and practice reciprocity to really feel the earth's gifts. The earth gifts us every day, and to share the part of ourselves in our life to build a community of hope. And my last quote is from Ralph Chamey. From a TED Radio Hour, "What a Living Whale is Worth in the Fight Against Climate Change." Let us not wait till we get it perfect, because if we wait to make it perfect, there'll be nothing left. So thank you so much for letting me tell you my story. I'm so glad to be here, and I'm glad all of you decided to take this time to spend with me listening to my adventure. Thank you.
Thank you, Deanna. That was amazing. So much information. Thank you so much. And I hope you can see all the hearts floating up across. Yeah, thank you. And so I think there's some questions, and maybe Donna can help with that in the Q&A. Donna, are you
Yep. There's
okay? Good.
let's see. So the first one was, what portion of rye or cover crop is in the seed mix?
Um, that you buy separate. So the at least if you go through Ernst, the cover crop you buy separately. And I don't actually, I just do it every year now. I will say, if you decide to buy it through Ernst, they were great. They'll talk to you on the phone and help you figure it all out. And so I always buy it. Shoot, I wish I had it available. Uh, I always buy the same thing every year, and I don't remember what the ratio is or what the amount was. Sorry.
Okay. The next question is, how do you keep it mowed at 8 inches?
Oh, thank you for asking that. I forget to say. So, or forget to say that you can't do 8 inches with a push mower or riding mower. So I use a trimmer. I just walk through with a trimmer. Um, Anytime that I can engage with the area is helpful too. So when I'm trimming, I'm looking like who's out here that's away from the path. But I do that. It is kind of, it's a lot. It depends on how much you decide to do. There are people who do and are successful doing this, mow it with a riding lawnmower at its highest height, which is, I think, probably maybe 4 inches. So if it's too large an area or you don't want to use the trimmer, then you can go ahead and just mow it.
Yeah, before we continue, Deanna, can you stop your share and then we can see everybody on the screen? Because I think we have also some questions from people who are still on. Thank you. Okay, Donna, go ahead.
How do you find straw without weed seeds?
I don't. I mean, I try my best. I will say that. I try my best to, but I can't always. I can't. There's not a consistent place I can get it. So I just ask them. I don't know. I just do my best. I don't have a source for getting weed-free straw.
Let's see. One of them is, can you explain what you mean by you do a cover crop every year?
Um, the cover crop, I don't do it every year. I only do it when I said every year, I meant every year that I plant seed. So after the first year, I don't do that. Um, so this is just the cover crop is included in the seed mix. And that is part of what you'll be controlling by, keeping it cut about 8 inches. You want it to grow in there, but you don't want it to shade out your littles.
Let's see. Did you run into drought issues in 2025? I started a small meadow, 2,000 square feet, and had areas under the rain shadow that grew virtually nothing.
I did. Um, I did. We're fortunate in that we have a wet meadow space, so it doesn't get quite as dry. But and I can't. I say I did with confidence, but sometimes I really don't know what's happening in those spaces if we didn't get seeded well. But I have had times when I think that the weather of that season, either too wet, sometimes too wet, or too dry, probably impacted it. I'm always surprised at how different each section is from the year before, but it's hard for me to know exactly what it is. Now, I also can come into some areas and seed again. I don't know how helpful that is. Um, I also honestly have the advantage of the nursery that I can go in the fall and plug in some little plants in areas that I feel like aren't very diverse or struggling, especially the areas where there's a lot of clover. If it's still that area is still struggling, which happened this last year. After during the second year, I might go in and just plug some things in. But yeah, I mean, every year there's some challenge with the first year. Once you get past the first year, then it does well.
Does the seed mix you use include native grasses? And if yes, About what percentage of your meadow is native grasses?
There are native grasses in the seed mix. They are the highest percentage. If you have meadow or prairie, meadows and prairies are dominated by grasses, so the seed mixes have a higher percentage. That said, I have really good luck with the cool season rye that come in there, and they're super helpful to get it started. I have not had the best of luck with the warm season grasses that come in later, being able to take over as the ryes begin to fade because they're just short lived, and so I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do about that. Last year, not this seeding year, but the year before, I included more. I got a separate seed mix to include with my original seed mix of some of the warm season tall grasses there, which can be aggressive, but I'm hoping to start bringing some in. So it included big blue stem and Indian grass. There might have been switchgrass in it too. I don't recall right now. I feel like those can be really aggressive, but they're also compete really well with the tall goldenrod. And I feel like my meadow is getting big enough that I can include some of them in there. But that's I haven't seen. It's too early to see any result from that. It takes them a while. So the answer to your question is, I think about 35% of the mix was my yearly mix is grasses that include the cool season and then some warm season.
The meadow field that we want to reclaim has grown up to shrubs and even saplings. Any thoughts on about how to remove these before mowing? And can we leave any trees in the middle of the meadow? Of course, they will contribute shade.
You need to get those out. Not the middle ones, but the ones that you don't want in there for your meadow. It depends on if you can't mow them at this point, then you would have to like cut and paint them. I think. I don't know any other way of doing it. And that would be like what I use is a dabber. I use old shoe polish bottles and just put the glyphosate mix in there and just cut and dab, but you'll need to get them out. I like leaving some trees and shrubs around the meadow. I think that's important. So I think I have in one of our, I think it was the fourth year, I planted a white swamp oak in there because I like the idea that savanna look. This is what I grew up seeing, like in the prairie areas where you have this big oak growing out in the prairie and scattered about. So that's kind of my plan for this. Also on the edges, just in the areas where we're just mowing to manage, I want the edges of our field to soften so it's not like this big rectangular field. So as trees just naturally come in, I choose ones that I want to leave and I mow. But once you get them cut down the first time, if you just mow every 3 years, you can control them pretty well that way. If you have something besides a riding lawnmower, we have a pull behind mower that we use.
What birds do you have nesting?
Bird people. We have red-winged blackbirds, of course. We have bobolinks. We have woodcocks that we hear. I saw them once along the edge. I've never like seen their nest. But let's see. There's probably something else. Oh, somebody said that they heard ground sparrows here. People who come visit are always the ones that get me excited about stuff because that know birds because they're like, oh, I hear this and this, and I'm not that good. But
yeah. If the soil is very compacted clay from recent construction project, can you recommend any additional soil prep if needed prior to solarization tarps or afterwards?
Yeah, so it's old agricultural field, so it can be very compacted and it's very clay. And I'm just letting the plants do the work. I think, native plants are really resilient, and like just that raking across, that light raking and them holding them in there, holding the seeds in place, and that's all that I do. Again, I will say that my diversity is less than it could be in there in my meadows because I'm not burning and I'm not really loosening the soil. But I'm hoping that that will change over time as it heals. There's definitely people out there that will bring in amendments in soil, especially like when they're tilling, and that's loosening the soil and probably making it easier for their roots. But I found that, those natives, they're tough nuts, they get in there. And I think that they're healing, and I think that they're healing the soil, and I think that they're making it the soil available for more diversity as it gets older. So we'll just see. But I don't do anything. I just tarp it and seed.
What do you think of using silo tarp?
This if I understand correctly, the silo tarp is not permeable. If that's correct, then I wouldn't use it. I know people that have gotten old banners, like places that sell those, also aren't permeable. And I guess I mostly worry about just water sitting there. I don't know. I might do it now that I'm talking about it. I might do it if I had access to some of that material. But I really like what we use just because it's permeable and it's been holding up so well.
Are there any new animals in your meadows? Are you affected by beaver?
We don't have beaver habitat, um, so we aren't affected by them. Um, are there any new? I mean, a lot. I would say that there's some really cool insects in there, like the shamrock orb weaver that I showed on there that I don't see anywhere else. And we do get a lot of insect activity, especially at night. If we walk in there at night in the summer with a flashlight, we see a lot of moth activity, which is really fun. Um, I think that the animals, like mammals that we see in there, are already on our land, but they do go over there, like fox and coyote, lots of rabbits, which is nothing new. Um, yeah, I can't think of anything that I would say is new, except for insects, probably specifically to that area.
Let's see. Someone said, I didn't notice any milkweeds in your photos. Do you have this in your meadow?
Yes, I do have them in the meadow. Common milkweed is the only one that is in our meadow. Um, we I have swamp milkweed outside of the meadow in what I'm trying to make like small demo meadow gardens. So they might spread in there eventually. And in the seed mix, there they have butterfly weed in my seed mixes, but I think I'm too wet for that, and it has not become established in there.
Um, how is the rapture perch working out?
I'm sorry, say that again.
How is the rapture perch working out?
Oh, um, someone who's been here. So last year we put up a what's called a rapture perch, and that is like it's about 20 feet tall, just perch to bring raptors in closer to the nursery. I have not seen a hawk on there. We do have owl activity closer to the nursery, so owls might be using it at night. And we do see occasional hawks around our woodland edge. So the idea is to bring. We have a lot of rabbit activity around our and problems around our nursery. So we were trying to bring in more predators. Um, so we put this up. I want to say it was late summer. So we're hoping this next year we'll get more activity to bring in the raptors closer to. They don't want to. They fly over. We see them flying over, but they really need a perch spot so they can watch. That's out in the field. So yeah.
All right. I think this is the last one. Is there a way to successfully propagate meadow plants without doing any soil prep other than mowing? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Um, I think what you're saying is, can you plant into the existing, like mow and plant into the existing space and be successful? Uh, and the answer to that is yes, but it takes a lot of work. Um, so yeah, I think that's what you're asking. Another thing that I didn't mention in here, though, that might be helpful is that we started what we call the crop circles out in the area that I described where the beetles were about 3 years ago. And we did tarp this area and then we did not seed it. We planted into it little seedlings and things. And we call them crop circles because they're set up so I can mow around them and keep the help to keep the goldenrod from encroaching, the can of goldenrod, in the hopes that it will seed out. And we actually, I mentioned it, we actually saw some evidence of that this year when the Monarda fistulosa was found out in the field. So, because we can't tarp acres and acres, we're trying different things, and that is one of them. And I'm hoping this next year, since we did have some goldenrod suppression, that we'll start seeing more. But there is also a project called the Marshy Garden at the Soil Factory, if you're not familiar with it, where they did what I think you were suggesting, in that they did not prep the soil or try and remove the soil at all. They just started planting in there, and it is an absolutely amazing project. That if you haven't seen it, you should get down and see it. I don't know how old it is now, at least 3 years probably at this point, and it is doing really well. But it takes the people who started it, Ash Berlito and Brandon Hoke, they spend a lot of time down there weeding it and making sure that there's room for those natives to grow. So there's all kinds of ways of approaching this. This is certainly not the only one.
That looks like it for our questions.